I thought this would be easy, and that's usually how I know it's about to go bad. Because whenever I say easy, what I really mean is I haven't thought about this at all. That's my system. I don't prepare. I just trust the version of myself 5 seconds ago, even though that guy has never been right. He's optimistic for no reason. He's like, relax, future me will handle it. Future me is exhausted. This started as one small task, more like a suggestion. That's the danger zone. When someone says, hey, just that word, just is doing a lot of work. Just is never accurate. Just is a lie people tell before your entire afternoon disappears. I heard the instructions, nodded confidently, immediately realized I had no idea what any of it meant. But I nodded anyway, because nodding buys time. Nodding says, I'm responsible, while my brain is sprinting in circles, trying to remember if I've ever done this before in my life. I walked away feeling good. That's the first red flag. If I feel good too early, I've definitely misunderstood something. I replayed the instructions in my head, except my brain edited them, removed the important parts, and replaced them with confidence. Now it sounded simple, suspiciously simple, like something a responsible adult could handle, which should have been my second red flag, because I am not that. About halfway through, I realized there were options. I don't do well with options. Options mean choices, and choices mean accountability. I stood there longer than necessary, hoping someone else would decide for me. Nobody did. That's when panic shows up quietly, not loud panic, polite panic, the kind that says, okay, we'll just pick one and see what happens. That's how every bad decision in my life starts. I picked what felt right, not what was right. What felt right, huge difference. It felt right because it ended the moment faster. That's my decision-making process. I don't choose the best option. I choose the one that lets me leave. I finished, stepped back. All right, that's done. And that thought lasted about 4 seconds. That's when I got the look, not an angry look, worse, a confused look. Confusion hurts more, because now you're disappointing someone intellectually. They're not mad, they're just trying to understand how you arrived here. That's when explanations start, and explanations are dangerous, because once I start talking, I realize how little sense my plan had. Hear myself explaining it and think, oh no, this sounds bad out loud. I tried adjusting my explanation mid-sentence. Worse. Now it sounded like I was lying, even though I wasn't. I was just discovering new information about my own thought process in real time. I added details that didn't exist, used words like basically, and kind of hoping they'd soften the situation. They never do. Basically just means I skipped the important part. At this point, I could feel time slowing down. Every second felt longer because I knew something else was coming. That moment where someone takes a deep breath before they speak. That breath is terrifying. That breath says, I'm about to explain something to you that I assumed you already knew. And once someone assumes you already knew, there's no way to admit you didn't without losing credibility you never actually had, so I doubled down. That's my move. When unsure, commit harder. I said things with confidence that I did not feel internally. Confidence is loud, uncertainty is quiet, and I decided volume might save me. It did not. Now I was confidently wrong, which is the worst version. Uncertainty at least looks humble. Confidence just looks reckless. Then came the pause. That long pause where nobody speaks, you start hearing things you didn't notice before. A clock, breathing, regret. I started thinking about how much easier this would have been if I had just asked one follow-up question at the beginning. One question, but I didn't want to look confused, which is ironic because now I looked extremely confused. Just later and with consequences, I offered to fix it. That was another mistake because now expectations reset. Now there's hope. Hope is dangerous. Hope means you're going to try again. And I have not proven I should be allowed another attempt. I stepped back and already behind, trying to correct something I never understood. In the first place, I was solving a problem I created with the same brain that caused it. At this point, my confidence was gone, replaced by careful movements and unnecessary apologies. I started narrating what I was doing, hoping transparency would help. Didn't. It just highlighted how unsure I was. Every move felt like it needed approval. Every second stretched longer. I could feel the moment slipping, that exact moment when everyone realizes this was never going to be easy. We're all just watching to see how bad it gets. It always starts with that dangerous thought, this should be easy. Not because I've done it before or because I'm qualified, but because I've decided emotionally, I don't want it to be complicated. That's usually the full evaluation. No research, no clarification, just a quiet confidence that shows up uninvited. I don't say it out loud at first, but it's there, sitting in my head, making itself comfortable. Easy means fast. Easy means no one will notice me. Easy means I can be done before anyone realizes I was involved at all. The confidence feels real in that moment. That's the tricky part. It doesn't feel reckless, it feels earned, even though nothing has happened yet. Start picturing the version of myself who finishes this smoothly. That guy is calm. He doesn't rush. He knows exactly what to do with his hands. People trust him immediately. I've never met that version of me in real life, but my imagination brings him out every time there's a simple task involved, and I let him take over. When the instructions come, I listen just enough to feel responsible. I catch the tone, not the details. Details are dangerous because they create follow-up questions, and follow-up questions expose weakness. So I nod at the right moments. I throw in a yeah or an okay. That sounds solid. Inside, my brain is already trimming the information down to something manageable, removes the complicated parts, and replaces them with confidence. Now, the task sounds like something I've already completed once. Even though I haven't started, there's a brief window where everything still feels under control. That's my favorite part. Nothing has gone wrong yet, and I'm operating purely on belief. I move with purpose, even if the purpose is unclear. Purpose looks a lot like competence from a distance. I rely on that. If I walk fast enough, if I don't hesitate, people assume I know where I'm going. That's not strategy, that's hope. Idea that this might not be easy doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up gently, like a polite suggestion I immediately ignore. A small detail doesn't line up, something feels slightly off. But instead of stopping, I speed up. Stopping would mean admitting the confidence was premature. Speeding up feels like momentum. Momentum feels professional. Convince myself that hesitation is the real danger, not the lack of understanding. At this point, committed to the idea of ease, I've invested too much confidence to turn back. My body language says I'm fine, so my brain decides to follow along. I start simplifying the task further, not because it's correct, but because it's survivable. Easy becomes the goal, not accuracy. Finishing becomes more important than doing it right. That's when the stakes quietly rise, because now I'm no longer trying to succeed, I'm trying to escape. There's a moment where I realize I've made assumptions, not small ones, structural ones, the kind that affect everything. But instead of reevaluating, I treat those assumptions like facts. I build on them. I trust them. Admitting they're wrong would mean the entire foundation disappears, and I'm standing there with nothing but eye contact and regret. So I keep going, hoping the situation respects my confidence enough to cooperate. The problem with starting confident is that it creates expectations I never agreed to meet. And they're smart. People assume I know what I'm doing because I look like I think I do. Now I'm trapped in a role I cast myself in without an audition. I can feel the weight of that decision as the task continues. Every step's still based on the original thought that this would be easy, even as reality starts pushing back in small, uncomfortable ways that I'm not ready to address yet. The instructions are never completely clear, but they're also never unclear enough to justify stopping the conversation. That's the dangerous middle ground. Delivered confidently, casually, as if this is something everyone already understands. And in that moment, you make a quick decision about who you want to be. You can either be the person who asks questions or the person who appears capable. I almost always choose appearance. Appearance feels faster. Appearance feels safer. Questions feel like paperwork. As the instructions are happening, attention shifts from understanding them to performing understanding. I'm no longer processing information, managing reactions. I'm watching for pauses where a nod makes sense, for tone changes where got it, sounds appropriate. My brain is doing just enough work to stay involved without actually learning anything useful. It's a skill I didn't mean to develop, but it's very polished at this point. The panic doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It waits until the instructions are over and everyone assumes we're on the same page. That's when it settles in quietly, like a realization you don't want to make eye contact with. I replay what was said. The replay is shorter than it should be. Important parts are missing. There are gaps where clarity should live. That's when my mind starts filling those gaps with guesses, because guessing feels proactive. I tell myself it'll make sense once I start. That's a comforting lie. Starting feels like progress, and progress distracts you from confusion. I lean into motion. Motion gives me something to hide behind. If I'm moving, no one can accuse me of standing still, and standing still is where questions happen. Questions slow things down. Slowing down invites scrutiny. So I keep moving. As I work, the instructions become more abstract. Words I nodded at earlier now require definitions. Phrases that sounded familiar suddenly feel open to interpretation. That's when internal negotiations begin. I ask myself what the instructions probably meant, what a reasonable person would assume. The problem is, I've already established that I'm not that reasonable person, but I don't have another option available. The panic grows, but it stays polite. It doesn't interrupt. It whispers. It suggests shortcuts, encourages confidence over correctness. It says things like, this is close enough, and no one will notice, and you can explain it later. Those thoughts feel practical in the moment. They feel efficient. They also stack up quickly, turning one small misunderstanding into a series of decisions that now depend on each other. Every time I make a choice based on a guess, the cost of stopping increases. Now I'm not just unsure, I'm invested. Smart admitting confusion at this stage wouldn't just be a question, it would be a confession. Would mean walking backward through my own decisions and explaining why each one happened without solid information. That's not something I'm emotionally prepared to do in public. So I adapt. I start interpreting everything in the most forgiving way possible. If something can be flexible, I assume it is. Something can be optional, I treat it that way. I tell myself that clarity is overrated, that experience counts more than instruction. None of this is true, but it sounds confident enough to keep me going. What makes the panic worse is how calm everything looks on the outside. No one is rushing me. No one is correcting me. That silence feels like approval. Even though it's just absence, I mistake it for trust. And trust is heavy because now I'm carrying expectations I never fully understood in the first place, still moving forward, still nodding internally, hoping the meaning reveals itself before someone notices that I've been guessing since the beginning. Once the instructions fade and the moment becomes mine alone, that's when the logic starts forming. Not good logic, personal logic. The kind that only makes sense if you don't say it out loud. Inside my head, everything connects beautifully. Every decision has a reason, every shortcut has a justification, and every risk feels calculated. Even though I never actually did any math, it's a private system. It works perfectly as long as no one asks why. I walk myself through the plan slowly, narrating it internally like I'm teaching a class that only I'm attending. Explain things generously. I give myself the benefit of the doubt. If something doesn't quite line up, I smooth it over with a phrase like, that's basically the same thing. Basically is my favorite word in these moments. Basically means I've noticed a problem, but chosen optimism instead. The logic feels solid because it's tailored to my comfort level, not reality. I remove unnecessary complications. They're smart. I assume flexibility where none was promised. I imagine how this would work if the world were slightly more forgiving, slightly more casual, and significantly more interested in me being done than me being right. In my head, everyone is relaxed. Everyone understands what I meant. Everyone appreciates the effort. What I don't realize yet is that this logic only exists in silence. It thrives in isolation. The second it encounters another person, it weakens. But for now, it's convincing. I start making decisions quickly, confidently, stacking one assumption on top of another. Each choice feels supported by the last, like a structure that looks impressive until you realize it's built entirely on air. At some point, I test the logic by imagining explaining it to someone else. This is where things start to wobble. I hear the words forming and notice how many of them require tone to survive. The logic depends heavily on delivery. It needs confidence, pacing, maybe a hand gesture. Without those, it sounds thin, suspicious. But instead of stopping, I revise the explanation in my head, adding context that wasn't there before. I start believing my own revised version. That's the dangerous part. Once I believe it, I stop questioning it. I move forward like someone who's already been validated, even though that validation came from me and me alone. I don't notice how much I've simplified things, how much I've assumed others will fill in the gaps the same way I did. I trust that the sense it makes to me will transfer naturally. Then comes the moment when I actually have to say something. A question, a comment, a casual check-in. The logic steps out of my head and into the room, and immediately it sounds different, louder, less coordinated. I hear it land and realize it didn't arrive the way it left. There's a pause after I speak. That pause is longer than expected. I try to help the logic along. I add another sentence, then another. Each one feels necessary, which is how I know it's not going well. Good logic stands on its own. Mine needs support. I start clarifying things no one asked about, which only highlights the parts that were unclear to begin with. I can feel the explanation drifting, and now I'm adjusting in real time, trying to steer it back towards something believable. What's frustrating is that the logic still makes sense to me. That hasn't changed. Inside my head, it's airtight, but now there's a disconnect between how confident it feels internally and how uncertain it sounds externally. I can feel that gap widening, and instead of addressing it, I lean into delivery, trusting that confidence might bridge the space before anyone asks the question I'm not ready to answer yet. There's a specific moment when confidence stops being natural and starts being deliberate. You don't announce it. You feel it shift. It's when you realize you're no longer calm because you understand what's happening. You're calm because you've decided panic wouldn't look good on you. That's when confidence becomes a performance. I straighten up a little. My voice settles into a tone I associate with adults who know things. I slow my movements down because nothing says I'm in control like unnecessary patience. At this stage, I'm not trying to be right anymore. Trying to appear stable. Stability feels achievable. It doesn't require facts. It just requires consistency. So I commit to whatever version of events I've already presented, even if I can feel it wobbling underneath me. Backtracking would draw attention. Adjusting would invite questions. Confidence, even misplaced confidence, feels like the safest path forward. I start choosing my words carefully, not for clarity, but for authority. Short sentences. Details invite follow-ups, and follow-ups are where this falls apart. I use phrases that sound final, like decisions have already been made somewhere higher up the chain, even though I am the entire chain. I nod at my own statements, subtly, as if to reassure myself they're solid. The strange part is how effective this can be, at least briefly. People respond to confidence instinctively. They relax, they stop checking. And that feels like validation. That tiny moment of relief convinces me this was the right move. I take it as proof that the performance is working, which only encourages me to lean into it harder. Now I'm committed not just to the task, but to the version of myself who knows what he's doing. That's when the stakes quietly rise. Because once confidence becomes intentional, it has to be maintained. Every new development now threatens the image. I can't react naturally anymore. I have to react consistently. I measure responses. I pause before speaking, not to think, to select the right level of certainty. Too much confidence looks suspicious. Too little invites help. I aim for a steady middle, even as my understanding slips further behind. When something unexpected happens, I don't flinch. Acknowledge it like it was part of the plan. Inside, I'm scrambling to adjust the logic, but outside, I'm calm. Calm has become my shield. I don't ask for clarification. I reframe. I reinterpret. I tell myself this is just a minor variation, nothing that requires reevaluating everything I've already committed to publicly. The performance starts to take energy. I can feel myself monitoring my tone, my posture, my timing. This is no longer effortless confidence. This is work. The more effort it takes, the more invested I become in seeing it through. Admitting confusion now wouldn't just be inconvenient, it would invalidate all this effort. I've already acted like someone who understands. I've already set expectations. There's also a strange pride that creeps in, not pride in doing it right, but pride in holding it together. I tell myself that even if the outcome isn't perfect, at least I stayed composed. At least I didn't panic. That becomes the new standard. Success is no longer accuracy, it's survival. As long as I can keep the performance intact, I feel like I'm still in control. The pressure doesn't come from confrontation. That would be easier. It comes from silence, from the space between words where no one says anything, but something has clearly shifted. You feel it before you can explain it. The room doesn't react, it observes. Being observed without feedback is unsettling because now you're left to interpret expressions, posture, timing. Every pause feels longer than it should. Every breath sounds louder than normal. That's when social awareness turns against you. Start noticing everything. The way someone tilts their head, the slight delay before a response, a look that isn't disappointment exactly, but isn't approval either. It's confusion, and confusion is heavier. Anger burns fast, confusion lingers. Confusion makes you feel like you failed a test you didn't know you were taking. I replay my last sentence immediately, searching for the point where things changed. Was it a word? The tone? Did I sound too certain? Not certain enough. I don't correct anything yet. Correcting would confirm there's something to fix. Instead, I wait. Waiting feels neutral, even though it's not. It gives the moment time to stretch. Stretched moments invite judgment. The longer the silence lasts, the more I feel responsible for filling it. Silence creates expectation. Someone is supposed to speak, and when you're the one who caused the silence, that responsibility lands on you. I start talking again, not because I have new information, but because movement feels safer than stillness. I add context that no one asked for. I clarify things that weren't unclear. Each sentence is an attempt to smooth over a reaction I can't fully see. What makes this worse is how calm everyone else appears. No one rushes to interrupt me. No one jumps in to help. That calmness feels intentional, like they're giving me space to fix it. Space sounds generous, but it's terrifying. Space means the outcome depends entirely on what I do next. I've already proven my decision. Making is questionable. I become hyper, aware of how I'm coming across. I monitor my volume. I soften my tone. I add small qualifiers to my statements, hoping they make me sound thoughtful instead of uncertain. Words like probably and I think start slipping in even though I've already committed to confidence. Now I'm trying to balance two versions of myself at once, and they don't cooperate. The pressure builds not because anyone is escalating, but because no one is. The lack of reaction feels like an evaluation in progress. I imagine conclusions being formed silently. Imagine people deciding how much faith to place in me based on this moment. That imagined judgment is heavier than any real criticism would be. At some point, realize I'm no longer focused on the task at all. I'm focused on perception. How I'm standing, whether I look nervous, if my face is betraying me. The task continues in the background, but it's secondary now. The real challenge has become managing the atmosphere I've created. I want to reset the moment. They're smart, but there's no reset button for social pressure. You can't rewind a pause. You can only move forward through it. Moving forward means making another choice under observation. Every option feels risky. Doing nothing feels like failure. Doing something risks making it worse. That's when the pressure peaks, not in noise or conflict, but in quiet expectation, where everyone is waiting, and I'm aware that whatever happens next will confirm what they already suspect, even though I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that is. The problem is that performances don't adapt well, rely on things staying predictable. And as new information keeps appearing, each moment requires a faster adjustment, a smoother response, a more convincing display. I can feel the margin shrinking. The confidence that once felt protective now feels fragile, like it can crack if I hesitate for even a second. I keep moving forward, committed to the act, hoping the situation resolves itself. before I'm asked to explain what I've been confidently pretending to understand this whole time. By the time I realize I've been spiraling, it's already too late to step back. The situation has escalated quietly, almost imperceptibly, but every action now matters exponentially more than the one before. I try to adjust, to fix small things, but each small fix depends on the previous one being correct, which I know in the back of my head it isn't. It's a chain reaction of uncertainty, and I'm the only link holding it together. Every movement carries weight. Every sentence risks exposure. The escalation doesn't announce itself. It creeps in subtle, like a shadow stretching across a room in the late afternoon, and suddenly I'm trapped in it. I start micromanaging my own actions, conscious of every gesture, every word. I'm careful now, almost too careful. It's the kind of caution that slows time and makes each decision feel monumental. Narrate internally what I'm doing before I do it, running through outcomes like a rehearsal in my head. That way, even if it fails, I'll at least fail predictably. Predictability is comfort. Comfort is temporary. And yet, I keep moving forward because I can't stop without drawing attention to the fact that I'm not actually in control. Attempts to correct minor mistakes only amplify the problem. Fixing one thing creates two new opportunities for failure. Adjust here, tweak there, and all the while I feel the tension rising. My hands hesitate over simple actions, not because they're difficult, but because the stakes feel impossibly high. Each correction carries the invisible burden of previous errors. It's like playing Jenga on a table made of thin glass. Push forward, praying the structure holds, even though every move makes it wobble. At this point, I start anticipating reactions before they happen. I imagine the subtle nods, the shifts in posture, the little signs that someone has mentally cataloged my errors. Anticipating their reactions becomes almost as important as the task itself. I speak a little slower, choosing my words carefully, trying to project competence while masking uncertainty. Confidence now feels performative, but necessary. Hesitation is contagious. If I falter, the situation spirals faster. Time stretches in unusual ways. Seconds feel like minutes because every choice matters. Every choice could tip the balance further. I replay every past action, questioning why I did it that way, what I should have done instead, and whether anyone noticed the misstep. I calculate outcomes that will never occur, imagining consequences so vividly that it feels like they're already happening. And yet, I have to keep moving. Standing still isn't an option. Standing still would be a confirmation of failure, and failure has already been seeded. The moment becomes a series of cascading small disasters, each dependent on my next move. There's no climax, no final crash, just continuous escalation. Every attempt to regain control is another chance to lose it further. I monitor reactions constantly, making micro adjustments, trying to stabilize the situation. Every gesture, every word, every pause is a calculated risk. None of them are guaranteed. The escalation feeds on itself, fueled by my attempts to fix it and the audience's quiet observation. Even as I act, I know the resolution isn't mine to choose. The outcome will be determined by factors I don't fully understand, by expectations I didn't clarify, by the small cracks that have opened in the structure I hastily built. Each step forward is an experiment, and the suspense grows because the audience, or anyone watching, is still holding their breath, waiting to see what will collapse first, the plan, my confidence, or the fragile perception that I'm in control. So, finished, or at least I stopped moving long enough to call it done. That's when she looked at me like I had just invented a new kind of chaos. Not angry, Just impressed in the same way you're impressed when a dog somehow manages to get itself stuck in a recycling bin. I thought I had handled it. I thought I had everything under control. But the truth is, I had barely survived. Everyone around me knew it, including me. That's the thing about easy tasks. They make you look like you know what you're doing until they quietly remind you that you don't. I walked away feeling a mix of pride and shame, which is exactly the balance I aim for in life. Part of me thought, well, at least I tried. The other part whispered, next time just don't volunteer. And maybe that's the lesson. Confidence is great, overconfidence is hilarious, and sometimes the easiest thing to do is just admit you have no idea what you're doing before anyone notices.